The weather affects everything, from how we feel to how we live. But what's really going on above us? Each week on Atmospheric Insight, we dig deeper into the science of weather and the stories it shapes. This is Atmospheric Insight, where science meets the sky.
Welcome back to another episode of Atmospheric Insight. I'm meteorologist Adam Epstein.
Yeah, meteorologist Riley O'Connor.
Riley, you sweating yet?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, a
little bit. Mainly at night, trying to go to bed.
No, I think that's when we really feel it.
Yeah.
I mean, in the valley, it's still pretty mild. You're in Delta, I'm in the valley. But the foothills, it's like full on summer feel because the cold air doesn't drop down to that level. It gets lower to us.
Yeah.
So you have lows in the 60s, highs in the 80s, and that is just pure summer.
Yeah. My kids are still wearing sweaters, like something like a layer in the morning when they're going to school, just because it's still a little bit chilly.
Yeah.
But man, once that sun hits you, it's hot.
Oh,
Or in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah. So a little bit of relief early in the morning, but then that goes away pretty quickly. And all of a sudden it feels like we're in summer. So what's going on here? Atmospheric impact. Of course, this week we are focusing on the heat and the record heat that we're experiencing throughout the West, specifically the desert Southwest. High pressure is sitting right over us. And what that does is it pushes air down on the surface, right? And that is a warming mechanism. As air, think of a parcel of air as a balloon, goes from high elevation or altitude to low elevation. It gets compressed by the air pressure and it excites the air molecules. They move faster. That generates more energy. That generates more heat. It's also keeping us very sunny too, so we don't get any relief from clouds, Riley.
Right. I'm wondering when the pools are going to be opening. I know it's not really specifically time yet for some of the pools, but yeah, I think it's warm enough that we could do this.
Yeah, so we're very ahead of schedule, but I think pool time sounds great when highs are near 90 degrees.
Right.
Another thing that's interesting about high pressure, it's getting in the meteorological weeds, but if you're watching this, I'm assuming that you like that. There's something called 500 millibar geopotential heights. So there are pressure levels, 500 millibars being one of them, that fluctuate in altitude. So it could basically be, for example, 1,000 feet up or 2,000 feet up. And that's determined by the warmth of the air column. If the air is very warm, it expands, so the pressure level would increase. If the air is very cold, it condenses, so that pressure level would go down. The 500 millibar geopotential height is the highest on the planet right over us with this high pressure system. So that essentially means this is the warmest air mass in the world right now, and we get to feel it.
So I guess, are we lucky?
I don't know if it's luck. Some people will consider it that way. Other people will think we're cursed.
Yeah.
I mean, look at this extreme heat.
Wow.
Locally, we're breaking records every day.
Yep.
But let's talk about Phoenix on the bottom right, 105, 107, 105. Phoenix has only recorded a single instance of 100-degree day in their recorded history in the month of March.
Yep.
Forecast to have 5 in a row.
Yeah.
And another thing that I found that was so interesting is not only would this, of course, break the all-time March record high temperature for Phoenix, this would break the April record high temperature for Phoenix too.
Yeah.
So it's so ahead of schedule.
You look at this and it's an area of concern.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, there are those who say, hey, we're not warming, that, it's not happening. But really, when you look at the science, it is.
Yeah, it definitely is. And we're going to talk more about that in the Ask Adam segment about, the forbidden word, at least on Facebook, which is climate change, or the phrase.
Right.
Right. It is happening. And people in the Midwest, they're experiencing a very cold outbreak, but it is all related. And we could talk about that if we have time later. But I just do want to focus on the heat right now that we're getting all throughout California. Los Angeles has an extreme heat warning. That's what the red is. Palm Springs. I mean, highs near 110 degrees. So pretty much everywhere you look, we're breaking records here. And unfortunately, another record we're very close to breaking is the lowest snow water equivalent at the UC Central Sierra Snow Lab at Donner Summit. Statewide, we're only at 40% of normal to date. This number has plummeted, Riley.
Yeah, and we were talking about this morning on the 11 o'clock show that some of the ski resorts have already closed down, or they are closing. This is the last weekend because of that.
Yeah, Sierra Tahoe, very popular one, not too far up the hill, pretty close to Sacramento. Sunday's their last day of operation. There's not enough snow to keep on going. It's not nearly cold enough to make their own snow. Everything's just melting at an alarming rate. And looking down the line, unfortunately, this is a huge concern for what could be a very fast and intense start to a fire season. The snowpack kind of acts like a deterrent to fires. it keeps everything wet, it keeps all the shrubbery alive. But once the snowpack is gone, everything dries out.
Yep.
It happens every summer. It gets hot, it gets dry. And if the snowpack doesn't keep things alive,
Yep.
then that's tinder. That
Yep.
is fuel for fires to feed on. So I wouldn't be surprised if this year fire season starts a bit earlier than it usually does, and
Right.
it could get more intense, but there's really no telling.
I have a question for you because being, newer here, I moved here last July, right? The word either unseasonably warm, or is it hot? Because
Yeah.
I heard that, you really don't want to use the word hot unless it's 99 or 100
It's
degrees,
funny
right?
that you've heard that because
Oh, I've heard it a lot in the last
yeah.
couple of weeks on how to, present the weather. It's unseasonably warm, but you forbid you say the word hot.
Yeah, I got that too when I first moved here,
Mhm.
and, like, someone would say that, like, it's not considered hot unless it's 100 degrees. And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I get that for the summer," but like you said, it's all relative. It's about
Right.
putting things into context, so unseasonably or seasonably. This is if anyone wants to argue with me on this, like, we can go toe to toe. It's unseasonably hot.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. Our temperatures are running about 20 degrees.
Yeah, our average is
Tw
66,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
20 yeah, 20 degrees above normal, 25 degrees above normal possibly.
Yep.
It's just insane. It's hot outside, Rob.
It
You can
is.
say it on TV.
Okay.
As your chief meteorologist, you have permission.
Thank you. All right. I have the green light.
Alright, let's, talk more about the term climate change and how it's impacting the heat that we're experiencing right now.
I posted this on my Facebook page yesterday. The Climate Shift Index indicating that our record-breaking heat this week is 5 times more likely due to climate change. A lot of people seemed upset, so let's speed run a little question and answer. Let's start with the easy ones. Lance, yes, it usually gets much hotter when it goes from winter to spring/summer. Well, we're technically still in winter, and these are record temperatures. Mark, I'm 64, has happened before, will happen again. No, it literally hasn't, Mark. That's why it's a record temperature. Kevin, correct, a naturally occurring cycle. Incorrect, more on that later. Now some personal attacks. Steve, F you, commie. Didn't realize that climate change was a communist stance. Kurt, you were my favorite local meteorologist. Were. Kurt, did you really think that I didn't believe in climate change? Come on, man. You can't be that surprised. I focus on science and education in all of my forecasts. Brenton, shut the F up. So annoying. You didn't have to look at the post or waste your time commenting. Paul, deep state cabal controlled HARP dude DARPA working overtime. All right, man. You lost me there. Don't know what to say to that. Now, the conspiracies. John, the climate change is from all the pollution from geoengineering. Tell the truth. Well, John, hold on a minute. I think we actually kind of agree. Humans did add all this carbon to the atmosphere, engineering our climate to be warmer. So we're on the same page, man. Brent, all a money scam. For who? I'm not making money on this, but I do know that the fossil fuel industries have been trying to convince you for a very long time that they're not doing anything wrong. And they're making money. And now to the politics. Kim, we didn't have hot weather like this when Biden was president. Therefore, I suspect this is due to Trump's policies. No, we did. Nick, what do you suggest, Adam? More taxes to combat warm weather in March? No, just to reduce our carbon output. Catherine, it's so great we made all these laws for property owners to follow, so it's okay. There will never be another firestorm. Just can't happen, right? Of course wildfires will continue to happen. But what do you suggest? We don't make any mitigation attempts and just let properties burn? Michael, meanwhile, kids go hungry and people go homeless. Smiling with sunglasses, crying, laughing, rolling eyes emoji. I don't get what you're trying to equate here. All of these are bad things. Out of the now 80 comments I have on this post, only about 2 of them were genuine questions, and this was one of them. Eric says, I understand that climate change is most likely the reason. Hasn't climate change been happening for thousands of years? For example, I just read about how many of the deserts used to be tropical. Is it also true we're coming out of a global cooling period, looking at the past 1,000 years? So since I'm assuming you're implying human-caused climate change, how do we know it's human-caused versus natural? Yes, climate change has occurred naturally. Ice ages, warm periods, shifting deserts, all real. And yes, we are in a modest cooling period over the past 1,000 years. So how do we know that it's human-caused? 4 main things. First is speed. The current warming is happening 10 times faster than any natural post-ice age warming that we have on record. Natural cycles are slow. This one isn't. 2, fingerprinting. We can distinguish human carbon dioxide from natural carbon dioxide based on carbon isotope ratios. Our atmospheric carbon dioxide carries the signature of burned fossil fuels. 3, natural factors just don't explain it. Solar output, volcanic activity, orbital cycles, they've all been measured, and they've either been flat or slightly cooling over the past 50 years, which would result in a decrease, not an increase, in temperatures. And 4th, models have predicted what we have observed. When scientists run climate models with only natural forcings, they can't reproduce this warming trend. When they add human emissions to the modeling, it matches. Honestly, this is my least favorite part of my job. I despise how a scientific issue has become a political one. And I know that most of those people complaining on my Facebook post skip this video in the first 5 to 10 seconds. There's no changing their mind. But if you made it this far, thank you. Thank you for hearing me out and having a willingness to learn something new.
So, I get a little bit emotional when I see these things and I post them and I read the comments because I do. I have nothing else going on. I read the comments. And something about screens bring out the worst in people. Like, those are only a sampling of the nasty comments I've gotten. And
Yeah.
people
You can say hi, how are you doing today?
yeah,
And somebody, it's always going to be, people want to say what they want to say.
right.
I do. This is what I really appreciate about this segment. This was a really strong segment. I loved how you brought the facts.
Thank you.
You
Yeah.
answer, you went through, and if somebody said something, you came back with a fact about it, especially the 4 main reasons. When you had the last question from, I can't remember his name, but he had a valid question. He was
Right.
asking out of concern, and you brought those facts. And I think that people do need to listen to that, do need to listen to the knowledge from scientists and from professionals.
Yeah, if someone has a genuine question and is open-minded to learn something new, I will have that conversation with you 100 out of 100 times. But there are also many instances where someone will say something, ask a question, maybe facetiously, and I'll spend time trying to educate them and inform them about something. And literally, one of the responses I've got was blah, blah, blah. They just don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And so,
And
shame.
you can't change their mind.
Right.
That's the thing.
That doesn't happen on the internet usually. It's a very hard thing to do.
Right.
All right, running a little over time, but we'll be right back in 2 minutes.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. I spoke with Dr. Petrozelli. She's a clinical psychologist. Now, this was a little bit ago after the time change, but it affects everybody, right? Even
Yeah.
after. And so I wanted to ask her some questions about how long it takes to adjust to the new time, especially with kids.
Hot topic.
Thanks for joining us on Atmospheric Insight. This week, we have once again, I'd like to welcome clinical psychologist Gloria Petrozelli. She's with the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences with UC Davis. Hi, Gloria. How are you?
Great to be here. Thank you, Riley.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Wanted to jump in and talk with you about the time change once again. We sprung forward. It's that time of year. We have an extra hour of daylight, but we've also, lost an hour of sleep. I wanted to focus on that for a little bit and talk about losing an hour of sleep, especially for children, and how that affects them even going forward in the next few weeks. Can you explain a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we didn't just lose an hour of sleep. It really was a disruption to our body's, circadian rhythm, our body clock. So for us adults, we may see this as irritability, low frustration tolerance, emotional reactivity. But for children, it'll show up behaviorally. The children don't always have the language or the ability to name what they're feeling. So they really express it in their behaviors. So instead of saying I'm tired, they may be more oppositional. They may cry more easily. They may have more meltdowns and struggle with the transitions throughout the day and the routines.
I have kids. I have twins that are 8 years old, and I am, what you talked about some of the signs. What can we do as parents to help that? Do we need to change the bedtime routine, even though we've already changed the clocks? How do we get back to that normal rhythm for them?
Yeah, I think keeping consistent routines. So even though it's normal for kids to have that reaction, shifting bedtime earlier can be helpful. Explaining to kids like, look, our bodies need to reset. Our bodies have a clock too. So this is just a temporary shift, and within a week we'll be back to normal. And so explaining to them, but also making sure they wake up at the same time, getting that morning exposure of sunlight really helps, because that's what we're trying to do, is reset that body clock. So making bedtime routines, calming and relaxing, limiting screen time, that's always has a lot of health benefits. And then also as parents to be flexible and patient. I have an 8-year-old, and so we're going through this. And
Yep.
so just explaining like, look, buddy, these are just some changes we need to do temporarily. Things are going to feel better after a week or two.
Okay. Good advice there. Let's dive in a little bit more about adults versus children. Why is it more sensitive for them versus older adults or even
Mhm.
teenagers?
Yeah, children are particularly vulnerable because their brains are still growing, right?
Mhm.
And sleep is imperative to that growth and development. So one, they're still developing circadian rhythms in their clocks, and they don't have the flexibility or control over their sleep-wake cycles like adults do. I
Mhm.
can decide to stay up an extra hour at bedtime or to go to sleep earlier. Kids don't, they're on that strict routine and don't have control over that. They rely heavily on structure and predictability. So changing the clock creates a shift in disruption in that routine, which
Mhm.
then impacts their ability to regulate. They're like, wait a
Mhm.
minute, my body says one thing, but we're doing another.
Mhm.
So keeping that structure just to let them catch up. But again, it's normal to react to that. And then kids have higher sleep needs, like 8 to 12 hours.
Yeah.
So losing an hour for them is more significant than for an adult. And then I think the bigger piece is that sleep impacts executive functioning, that frontal
Mhm.
lobe. So that's responsible for attention, working memory, impulse control, emotion regulation. So when we
Mhm.
don't sleep, that part of our brain gets impacted first. And so children are really sensitive to that.
Okay. And going forward with the sleep routine, right? Because now it's getting darker a little bit later. And my kids, for example, typically we start doing the reading routine around 7 o'clock, and then by 7:30 it's bedtime. Well, now it's still light. Do you recommend dark shades? How do you recommend that for children who are younger that may have an earlier bedtime and it's still light outside and maybe fighting that
Yeah.
sleep?
Yeah, I think those environmental cues are really important. So, if possible, in our kiddos' room, we have the dark shades. So when we
Mhm.
pull the blinds, they really do kind of close out any of the light.
Mhm.
And then towards the evening, if you want to just kind of dim the shades in the house, make the lighting kind of lower and calm.
Mhm.
When you can set that whole environment, kids will adjust. They're
Mhm.
really resilient and
Mhm.
adaptable. So I think like if parents, we model being off the screens and
Yep.
relaxing and maybe reading before bedtime
Yep.
ourselves, they're going to do the same thing. That's the great thing, they're gonna model with with parents do or our siblings in the household.
That's
Yeah.
good advice. I'm very much about limited time, limited screen time, and
Yeah.
usually it's right after school that they get to watch a 30-minute show, typically on
Hmm.
PBS. But at night, it's usually that settle down time where we can read and kind of
Yeah.
start, doing the calm routine.
Hmm.
One more question too. I know we focused more on children right now, but what about adults? Maybe some adults are still struggling with this and finding that they're tired in the morning or not wanting to go to bed at their normal routine. Is that typical? And if it is typical, what can they do to help themselves as well?
Yeah, it is typical. I think we're all going through the adjustment and experiencing that. I think it's really no different than children is keeping to our routines and getting that sunlight first thing in the day. That's going to trigger our body to wake up, start the day, and our circadian rhythm will catch up, right? And so the idea is that when we change the times, our melatonin gets released later. So
Mhm.
the circadian rhythm really needs to kind of get in line with that
Mhm.
whole process in our body. And so if we can just be patient with ourselves, give ourselves grace, I think extra stress management, keeping expectations low right now. What do I need
Mhm.
to do to move through my day and my routines calmly and slowly? So getting outside, doing some good stress management and walks. But again, I think noticing how it's affecting you, so increased awareness.
Mhm.
If it's irritability or feeling frustrated or tired or sluggish, name it. It's okay to say, this is what my body's adjusting through, and then communicate to people in your environment, like, hey, I'm feeling off this week. The hour's really catching up to me. And then just trust that, well, within a week or two, you should be back in your routine. It's
Perfect.
temporary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be good to know, especially in our household.
Yeah.
Dr. Petrozelli, thank you so much for joining us today in Atmospheric
Great.
Inside, and we will be talking to you once again sometime in the near
Yeah.
future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Weather plays a huge role in the wine industry, from heat to rain to wind to fog to an early freeze. All these factors impact how the grapes grow and ultimately how the wine tastes. Today we're visiting Teneral Cellars, which recently moved their tasting rooms from Amador County to Sacramento, to discuss how weather impacts everything from the vineyard to the glass.
We're Teneral Cellars. We're a women-owned and run wine company, and we sustainably farm and produce award-winning wines and donate over 10% of our profits back to organizations that empower women and fight for gender and racial justice.
Yeah, and to date, we have donated over $300,000 to those causes, that we are not only giving back to the community, but we're also creating and producing really good product. And we like to say that we party and pour with purpose.
That we do.
And that's very important to us.
What inspired moving your tasting room from Amador County to Sacramento?
You know, it's interesting, and this is a great tie back to weather. There's been so many changes in the environment, and with global warming, the fires, increased our insurance significantly. It's impacted the gluttony. There's a glut of wine, and the wine industry has been at a 30-year low. And so, with so many changes, and even the way people consume wine, we realized that not as many people were coming up to the wine country. Didn't matter what brand you were. And as a brand that is mission-based, we're like, let's bring the brand to where the people are.
And it's been a blast.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Being down here in Midtown has been awesome.
How long have you had your vineyards? And have you noticed a change in the weather patterns?
Since 2020. So, but we purchased the vineyards in Amador in 2023, and then we just closed that tasting room in September to move down here. But we also had vineyards up in Fairplay since 2017. We've been farming for a while, and it's just really important. And we've seen the dramatic changes in the weather. I mean, our vineyard in Fairplay is at 2,700 feet, so we've seen, different seasons where we've had a lot of snow that even sticks. And then the last couple of years, it's been really mellow. Like maybe we'll have, I think a couple of weeks ago there was a little snow, but other than that, last season we literally had a dusting of snow.
What is the biggest weather challenge you currently face?
Biggest challenge is when it comes to April, when you have bud burst, and then we typically get some frost. And so a lot of vineyards will actually lose a percentage of their crop due to frost, because you can get one freezing evening, and if you don't have time to get on that, which you won't, pretty much, then you're going to lose a percentage. But we always kind of calculate that into that. You just don't know what kind of season it's going to be. But then you have the extreme heats, right? So in the summertime, we've had mellow summers, and then all of a sudden we'll get a hot spell close to harvest in September or late, August, September. And because so many people they outsource their farming, and everybody's kind of scheduled for when to pick, your winemaker needs to be in the vineyard at all times, because when you have those extended heat patterns, the Brix level, the sugar level of the vines or the grapes are going to go up significantly, and you may have to call it a week earlier than your pick schedule, because otherwise you leave it on the vine too long and it's going to become a raisin, and you're going to get the sugar level too high. That impacts the alcohol level, and it impacts the flavor.
How does wildfire season affect the vineyards?
And so then you have smoke, and it's not really the smoke that does the damage, it's the soot. So when the soot hits the grapes, it's really the soot that's doing the damage to the grapes. And that can significantly impact. So even if your vineyard's not necessarily the one in the fire, when we've had the Caldor fire and other fires, and even in Napa, you get a lot of damage. That's been really tough. There's been a lot of damage to a lot of winemakers and a lot of vineyards over the last 10 years with the rise in fires due to the climate change that we're having. And so it's really impacting people in a significant way.
Have you personally dealt with any wildfires?
We were evacuated for a while with the Caldor fire, and the firefighters in Somerset and that whole region did a phenomenal job of literally putting a perimeter around all of the vineyards. We had very little damage in our entire community of winemakers. We were extremely fortunate to not lose the crops, and because the wind was blowing the other way, didn't really do a lot of damage to the vineyards either.
Coming up next week, we will continue our interview with Teneral Cellars to find out more about the challenges they deal with due to changing weather patterns.
Thank you to Genevieve, and thank you very much for joining us in another episode of Atmospheric Insight. See you again next week.